Right, welcome everyone. Main hall for the next talk. So I'll get out of the projector now. Our next talk in this room is by Ruan Pretorius, who describes himself as a data scientist who loves machine learning and AI. He describes his role as turning coffee into AI. I assume there's something different on your job description. Your boss isn't paying you quite for that. That would be great. Yeah. He's currently playing with AutoGPT and LangChain, and what he's going to talk to us about is how to build a data pipeline without data. Sorry, I didn't catch me. What I said, without data. Synthetic data generation and testing with Python. That's quite a mouthful, and I don't 100% understand it, so we'll have Ruan explain it to us. Ruan, fantastic. Let's go. Thanks.
Thanks everyone. This is kind of a little bit of a clickbait title because you need data for a data pipeline. But I'll be showing you how to create synthetic data for testing your pipelines. So I think most of this has been covered. I'm a data scientist at Melio AI. You can check us out on LinkedIn. We're always hiring and we're posting cool stuff. We help people build and deploy their data-intensive apps to unlock value from their data. And you can also find me on GitHub, or you can contact me via email. I will be posting all of this on GitHub as well. So if you want to dive deeper into it, you can have a look there. So just a little bit about what we'll be taking a look at today. We'll go through what are data pipelines and why do we need them, why they're useful, and then some challenges when we build and test our data pipelines, and then that'll lead into how we can use synthetic data to help test our data pipelines, and I'll show you some tools and methods that you can use for generating reliable synthetic data with Python. And then finally, we'll talk about some benefits and challenges to doing all this. So what is a data pipeline? What I mean by this in the talk today is that it's a series of operations that is used to extract, load, transform, validate, or write some data, and it's usually from various different sources into some file system or database or data warehouse of sorts. Sorry. So sometimes you might not have access to the real data that you want to use to test your pipelines with, or any apps that come downstream that consume your data. And this could be for various reasons. Maybe the data is too sensitive or confidential, it can't be shared. Maybe it's not even collected yet, it might not be available at all, or large or complex to handle some initial testing. So this makes it challenging to design any of the downstream apps and processes that will consume the data. It also makes it challenging to design any of the logic they'll process your data because it's not available. It's also difficult to test the performance of your pipelines if you don't have data to do that with. So enter synthetic data. What I mean by this is it's just some artificially generated data that has some of the same characteristics as the data that you really want to use. And this could help us test our data pipelines because we'll have a sample that we can actually run through our pipeline, and we can also control, because we create the synthetic data, we can control the size and shape and also the distributions of the data. So we can cover specific scenarios and edge cases, which is also useful for testing. And because this is not real data, it also reduces the risk of exposing any sensitive or confidential information that might be present in the actual real data. So I'll be doing a little demo today. I'll show you how to create some of the synthetic data, and I'll specifically show you how to use a package called Faker that'll handle the creation of the synthetic data. And then I'll show you how to use Flyway to migrate the data into your database in a nice repeatable way. And we'll be using a Postgres database to do that today. There are many ways you can create synthetic data, but this is what I'll show you today. And once again, this is for the purposes of, so you can test your data pipelines and any downstream things that will consume data from your database without having it. So let's be a little bit more concrete and imagine that we just started an e-commerce website, and we have some kind of idea of the data that we'll actually have one day. It'll be something around customers, the products that we sell, and the transactions of these customers. So there's a little diagram. I hope that's clear enough. Sorry. Yeah. So we'll have our database it might contain some tables, one for the customers where we'll store things like their name, email, phone, city they live in, etc. And then we could have a table for products that'll store like the name and the description, maybe the price. And then we can even store the details of the devices that people use to perform these transactions. And finally, we can have a table that contains the transactions where we link the customers with the products that they bought and the quantity, etc. So one day, our customers will provide us with this data, and then we can build some pipelines and dashboards using that data to see how well our business is doing. And we'd like all of this to work as soon as we get real customers, but we don't have customers yet. So we'll just make some data for them because we don't have data for them either. And then we can get started on building everything downstream without having real customers yet. Okay, so let's dive into some code. What I'll show you is we can import SQL Alchemy and Faker. And in this case, we can use SQL Alchemy to create the database objects so we can interact with them in a nice Pythonic way. And here I just show we can import some things to specify the data types that we're going to use to create our tables. And then you'll see this coming in later. We'll also use this declarative base to make it a little bit easier to create objects for the different tables we want to track. And then Faker, as I said, will be used for creating the actual fake data. And it's as simple as an import, and you make an instance of this class. And I'll show you a couple of the methods that we can use later on. Okay, so let's start with our customer object first, and you'll see we'll do a similar thing for all the tables that we're going to use, where we inherit from this base class so that it's easy to describe our class without necessarily specifying the dunder init method. And we can put here all the columns that we want to have in this table. So for the customer, we might have a name, email, phone, address, city, and country. And then we can also just specify the data types for each of these strings or numbers. Okay. So once we have that object, we can create a little helper function for ourselves that will actually populate an instance of a customer with fake data. And this is where Faker comes in. So you could do, as you can see here, you can call these simple methods on the Faker object. And it has a couple of nice built-in things like name, email, phone number, street address, city, country. And this will give you, it's quite simple to use out of the box, and it'll give you this type of synthetic data quite easily. And one thing that I didn't show here is you can provide to the Faker object that you create in the beginning a locale. So you can, if you want emails or street addresses that are maybe German specific or Italian or Japanese, you could do that as well pretty simply, but it defaults to US English. So now we do the same thing for our product This is really the same as before. We inherit from that base class, and we track the name, description, category, and the price. And then we create a helper function that'll create products for us. And what I want to show you here is that you can create like kind of random words and also random sentences. And in this case, I used it to define the name and the description of our products, which is arguably, you can probably do better than that, because this sentence wouldn't be a product description. But when you run out of things that come out of the box with Faker, you can easily extend it as well and create your own, what they call providers, in which you can make it create sort of arbitrary synthetic data that suits your needs. It also has this a couple of useful methods like this where you can insert your own types of data, and in this case we can use the random element method that'll uniformly sample between these strings, and we use this to specify a category for our product, so like electronics, fashion, books, games, etc. And then one thing we might also want to do is for price data, you could use this pi decimal method, where you just specify how many digits on the left and the right of the decimal you want, and you can also enforce it to be a positive value, which it would be for prices. And I included this device object just to show you how easy it is to create some of these types of data that you also might want to use. So this is a nice one. When you call user agent, it'll give you a string that specifies the operating system of a device, as well as a web browser and the version and the type, which is it's quite a nice one to specify that if you want. And you could also do IPv4 or 6 if you want. You can even do private or public IP address specifically. It comes out of the box nicely. And then you can also do MAC addresses. And finally, our transaction object, pretty much the same as before. I just wanted to include here some extra information like the date time that you might want to track. So you could do date between, and you can pass a start and end date, and it will give you dates in that range. Then one extra thing that I did with the transaction data here is you might want to use not completely random customers or products, but the ones you specified earlier. So in this case, we can pass it a list of those customer objects that we created earlier. Same for products and devices. And then a little bit lower down, like here for the customer, we can just randomly pick one of those that we created and grab its ID, since it's an object with an ID attribute. So that's a nice way you can use some of the random objects that you created before inside new, like random tables or synthetic tables. And then you could also use something like random integer, where again you can specify a min and max range, and this random element you've seen before, which I use here to specify the payment method. So that's just like a quick overview to give you some idea of what you can do with Faker out of the box. Okay, so now we created our objects and our helper functions that'll help us to generate these instances. And now we can basically create a list of these objects for ourselves. So what we do here is I just used a list comprehension here, which is like a compressed way of writing a for loop, and it's sometimes faster as well. So we create 1,000 customers, 60 products, and 1,000 devices. And then, like you saw before for the transaction objects, we pass it our customers, products, and devices that we created just here, and we'll make 5,000 transactions. And now we have all our synthetic data created, but it's in memory. We might want to write it to a database. So we have a choice here. Since we used SQL Alchemy to write all these objects, we can just use that to write it to our database. But I wanted to show you a little bit about this tool called Flyway today, which is, it's nice because it handles version controls of your SQL scripts. So the scripts you might use to create these tables and insert the data into those tables. You can have a nice version tracker using Flyway, and it also, like I mentioned before, it handles migrations, so you can have repeatable deployments and more certainty about the database state. So if you made little tweaks here and there, or someone else made a quick update here, but you're wondering if is this in our testing database or is it in prod, they can just run the Flyway migrate, and it'll detect what changes have been made and which ones haven't. It'll run it in order so you can be sure of the database state. And this is all helpful for collaborating with other developers. So you can think of Flyway as almost like Git for your database, since it tracks these SQL scripts. So we need to now, we have all these objects in Python objects with the synthetic data. Now we need to create some SQL scripts. So we'll kind of convert to a string first, which will be a SQL statement, and we'll write that to a SQL file, since that is when it will be trackable by Flyway. So again, we have a couple of options here. You could do some simple string manipulation. You could use like an F string and just put the table name here, and for the rest, you write out the SQL with the data types and everything you want. Or you can use SQL Alchemy to testing. Cool. That's much better. Thank you. Yes, so you can use SQL Alchemy as well to get the SQL string that you want. And this is one way to do it. I won't go too much into this, but you can use your class object that you created before, which could be the customers or the products, and you can call compile and then convert it into a string. And this will give you something similar to this up here without having to write the data types like explicitly here or hard coded like that. So now we have to do the same thing for our insert statements. That was for the create table statements. And again, you can, if you want to use some simple string manipulation, you can grab the object properties here and just pass it into here to create your SQL statements. Or you can use SQL Alchemy again. One thing you can do is import this insert command here, pass it the table name like we did before, and you can pass it the values that you want to insert into this table, which in this case, this records variable that I put here would be a list of our objects created before, and then compile, convert to string. All right. So to use Flyway, you have to install it. You can use the CLI, or if you prefer a graphical user interface, there's Flyway Desktop for that. So it's quite simple to install. There's some instructions online, and you just have to configure it to tell it which database you're using, which schemas inside that database you want to track, and specify the connection properties. And then it's a good idea to start fresh. So to drop all the tables, views, procedures, all the objects in that database, you can start off by running Flyway clean, and you can start fresh, right? And then after that, to actually migrate, to create those tables and insert the data into those tables using our SQL scripts that we created, you run Flyway migrate, and it'll run all the scripts in the specified order. so that to update your database state. And like I said, for Flyway Desktop, it's quite a simple download and install, and you do some minor configuration just to tell it which database you want to use. And I hope that's clear, but it would look something like this. You click, there's like a drop down, there you go, where you just say clean and it'll do the same thing. And here you can see that list over there is a list of our scripts that we specified. And you can see once it's cleaned, it'll be in a pending state. Right there. So that shows you that Flyway picked up those scripts and it knows that it hasn't been applied to the database yet. So what you want to do next is to perform the migrate. So it's a similar thing where you do a click, you just click on migrate and it'll run those scripts in order so that your database state is up to date. And then finally, you might want to inspect your data. We're using something like pgadmin, and there's proof that there are, I think that's pretty hard to see, but you have your customers' devices, products tables in there, and then you can see some of the synthetic data there. I'll show that at the end, so you can actually see the database contents better. So just zooming out from that specific example, just some general pros and cons of using synthetic data. Like you saw, we can speed up the development and testing process, and we can, because we have control over the data that we create, we can increase the coverage and the quality of our testing. But of course, this is synthetic data, so you might not be able to capture all the nuances and variations that exist in your real data, and it requires some additional effort depending on how realistic you want to make your synthetic data, and you might have to maintain this as well if it's depending on how complex it is. That could be a little bit of a challenge. So just some tips and best practices that you want to consider when you do this. It's good to define the scope and the purpose of the synthetic data before you even start building it, just to save yourself from wasting too much time trying to create something unnecessarily realistic. You don't want to, because you can get stuck in that rabbit hole, but just build what's necessary to save yourself some time so that you can start building all the downstream apps. Also, use existing tools and libraries if you can. Like I showed you today, I think it could speed up the process. You don't have to reinvent the wheel necessarily. And always validate your synthetic data against a real data schema if that's available, or also your business rules to make sure that the synthetic data you're creating is actually what you need. And then it's always a good idea to document the process of your generation and define exactly what's in your synthetic data so that people who use it know how to use it. So we discussed some challenges of building and testing data pipelines without real data, and we learned how we could build some synthetic data in Python to test our data pipelines. And I also showed you a little bit about how you can use Flyway to load that synthetic data into your database. And that's it. This is all on GitHub. Like I said, you can have a look there, or just ask me if you have any questions. I can also show the database in pgadmin if you're interested. Okay. Yeah. So this is what that screen recording that I showed earlier. I hope that's visible. So yeah, some of the tables that we created: customers, products, transactions, and you can see here some of the names like email addresses, phone numbers. This was all created with Faker. So it just gives you an idea of what it looks like. Yeah. Thank you.
have a slightly awkward duet here while both of us have one microphone. Thank you very much, Ruan. You certainly taught me something. I did not know about Flyway. I have used Faker poorly. I'll use it much better now, but I certainly didn't know about Flyway. So that's taught me something. I hope it's taught everybody else something useful too. I'm going to take the one online question just to be sure. The question from Ndiabonga asks, are we able to get the slides? As a general comment, just to note, we do tend to get the slides from our speakers after the conference and make them available. That said, it's probably in the GitLab as well, I'd guess, or at least maybe the code is. But you can also contact Ruan, who's hunting down somewhere in the Markdown. Slides by Markdown, man after my own heart. Yeah.
Yes, thanks for the question. It's available in the GitHub repo, and you can find it under the slides folder, where you could use it. You could see it in Markdown if you want to change it, or see the HTML or PDF compiled version of it.
Thank you. And the follow-up question then is, well, the question is, where can you get the install instructions for some of the tools you used? I assume that's mainly on the websites linked through the, okay, cool. Yeah.
Have a Google. Yeah.
Have a Google,
Just
basically.
Google.
Yeah, okay. Any questions from the floor? Without my glasses on, I can see two hands coming to you. Actually, if I could ask, just shout it out and I'll repeat it, rather than me come and go, if you don't mind. Thanks. So let's go with, at the back first, yeah. So the question is, can you generate special data, as in custom application type data, or unique or custom data, basically, if I understand correctly? Custom allocation, that kind of thing. Okay, cool.
Yes, I think there's a geolocation extension. So for Faker, you can create your own extensions if you want, and there's a community out there that already created some useful ones, and I believe there's one for location specifically. But you can also, I forgot the method name for this one, but you can, if you have like a complicated product code, let's say, where it's something like integer, dash, capital letter, lowercase, something like that. You can specify that format as well, and it'll follow that format and populate it with random data. I hope that answers the question. Does it? So the tables that I created are not linked. Sure. So the question was, the tables that I created, are they linked? Right. So they were not linked. You can, I think, with a little bit of manual work from your side, try to link them a bit better. So like the transactions table I created, where it kind of picked some of the users and products that we already created. So in that way, you can try create links. Yeah.
There was another question? Sorted. Okay, cool. Good question. You covered two people's questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Any further questions? Otherwise, there was a question on the Discord about where the GitHub, but somebody else on the Discord found that, so it's already posted, sorted. Good. Cool. Shoot. Okay, so yeah, as Ruan circles back, the question was, for making the first two tables, the price was created differently across the two. It was a curiosity as to, why the difference. Yeah.
Thanks. Are you talking about this line? This line. Let me know if I don't understand the question properly, but this was just to, so all the prices here will have 3 digits to the left of the decimal and 2 on the right. But you might want to not have everything in the hundreds. So you could maybe use NumPy or something else instead here for your prices, depending on your... price is created differently on a table that comes before. I'm not sure. Do you want to... This one? Oh. Maybe I didn't follow my own schema. Eagle eyes, thank you. Yeah, you should probably follow your own schema.
Right, anything further? Otherwise, I think we're bang on time. It's still a little early, actually, but thank you, Ruan. I think perfect. If this is any further questions, quick check online. Oh, sorry, I almost missed one. Well, actually, it wasn't a question, but a very welcome comment from India Bonga saying that was a great talk. Thank you, Ruan. Thanks, guys.